My name is Marlene Sorensen. I am the co-founder of Zateo Community, and I have with me today Sula Leal. She's a survivor leader, and it's a privilege to have her with us. So we're going to ask some questions. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be with you.
Oh my gosh, it's great. Yes. So should we dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay. So can you just tell us about your journey, Sula? What were the circumstances that led to your trafficking experience?
I actually had several trafficking experiences over the course of my life. It started out as a toddler. I had a single mom working hard, going to school, and so that meant she needed to rely on people to watch me and babysit me. And unfortunately, one of those families was an occult trafficking family. So from 18 months old to 3 years old, my first memories in life were exploitation, and being moved from mattress to mattress to mattress on the floor, hiding in closets, being pushed under comforters, and just horrible memories. But that I thought was normal because those are my first memories that I have in life. And my mom found out that I was being abused because, and this is going to be kind of shocking, but I asked my mom for oral sex because I was conditioned by my traffickers to provide and receive oral sex from adults. That was part of how they were exploiting me. And so she got me into, therapy and reported it and all the stuff. And so since life started that way, I struggled with a lot of mental illness. And I had an awareness of spiritual abuse as well as physical abuse because of the occult nature of the first exploitation. There are several other elements to my story leading up to the next exploiter or pimp, but some of the vulnerabilities were the mental health and struggling to try and figure out who am I, because I had split personalities and parts as a toddler. To go through that type of trauma, you don't just go through that and live with the full consciousness of that as a whole person. So I had personalities and parts, and so that was one of the things that left me vulnerable. And trying to figure out how to calm the noise down inside and the nightmares at night, the things that I was wrestling with spiritually and physically, led to some self-medicating with alcohol, drugs. And so my next pimp enters at age 14. And that's when I was getting into all of that, which was another vulnerability, the drugs and alcohol. So I was doing really well at school, which was interesting. But then I would have ecstasy and acid in my backpack and a vodka bottle in my backpack. But I was really excelling at school. So my teachers didn't really know, there was stuff going on. And so age 14, I'm introduced to how to sell drugs, criminal activity, guns held to my head, brought to San Francisco, and really just taught about pimp culture. Later, around age 17, he and some of his other pimp friends moved away to Vegas, and I was still in high school, so they couldn't just take me with them. I was still actually in school living with my family. So later on at age 17, there's actually a female trafficker that came into my life. By now, I'd already had 2 abortions, drugs, alcohol, the mental health. I'd already experienced rape, physical abuse, verbal abuse. I'd already experienced so much by this age that I really didn't have a sense of value for my body because I felt like my value had been taken away. And so she coerced me into the strip club scene in San Francisco. And that actually led to then being sold and exploited in hotels in San Francisco. And So it just seemed like this theme of trauma, exploitation, trying to figure it out on my own. And I would be going from one, like I was a completely different person in this space of being exploited than when I was at school and when I was at home. So it was kind of like compartmentalizing everything, which is the nature of dissociation. I had already had a suicide attempt by then, clinical depression, PTSD, anxiety, panic attacks. So just trying to figure it all out. That was just a whole nother level of exploitation than I had experienced before. And that's where I saw a lot of cash, like lots of cash. I really hadn't seen the exchanges of value for the sexual services that I was forced to provide in my previous exploitation.
Okay.
So now I saw like piles of cash on the stage, or in the hotels, I saw things being exchanged with that female trafficker. And that led to later, when I was in a time in life where I didn't have anywhere to live and anywhere to go, I remembered, well, I don't really have much value for my body anyways. And I know how to get a lot of cash fast. So I actually started self-exploiting and dancing in a strip club for 6 months. That was a whole nother world. And I was just really struggling with my purpose for living at that time, because it just seemed like it was one trauma after the next, one horrific situation after the next, one person I was in a relationship that I thought, oh, maybe this person will love me, after the next, which was another vulnerability. I was looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yes, of course. Yes.
I think a lot of women can identify with that in one way or another. But, you know, that led to a suicide attempt ultimately, because I just felt like, why am I even alive? Why am I here? And in the middle of a suicide attempt, I had an encounter with the Lord. I had an encounter with God. And I wasn't expecting such a holy God to come into a drunken stripper's suicide attempt, but he did. And he wasn't intimidated by my shame or my trauma or the mess that I was in.
It's beautiful.
And in that moment, I had this like vision and this experience where I saw all these people, and they were just like waiting and eerily like looking at me. And I had the sense of, my life is not just about me, that there's others that I'm supposed to reach for him, for the Lord, for him. That is actually what took me out of that suicide attempt. And life didn't get perfect all of a sudden, but I think that was my first like personal encounter with God, where it wasn't clouded by what other people said about God or clouded by other stuff. It was like, whoa, this is really real.
It's pure.
Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful.
So there's a couple more exploitative situations that happened after that. I mean, I still didn't have a support system around me, which was another vulnerability. I was trying to figure things out by myself. I didn't really have a support system that I could process things with. And, you know, I moved around a lot. So that came into play. And ultimately, I ended up moving to Los Angeles into the modeling and acting scene, thinking, hey, maybe this is how I'll like travel around and help people in philanthropy. And maybe this is how I'll, and, you know, traffickers have a way of profiling people to see if there's trauma in the past, to see if they can be controlled or dominated. And so it seemed like they just always found me. And so I ended up getting sold overseas. I was purchased by a billionaire, actually as a Christmas gift for him and his main girlfriend. And made it and survived out of that, got back to the US, and then was trafficked for a while in the Hollywood, like to the elite and the wealthy. And my ultimate escape out of the perpetual cycle of experiencing abuse and the horrors of sex trafficking actually happened when I had another encounter with God in a Malibu mansion, where I just surrendered my life to God and I said, I am trying to figure out my purpose. I'm trying to figure out my identity. I'm trying to figure everything out on my own. And I feel like I always end up in gutters. And so I want that purpose that you have for me.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, because before I tried to include a little bit of faith here and there, my best of my ability that I could, but I didn't fully surrender my life to purpose. Right. In that moment, that's where everything changed, and I was able to start healing and moving forward. And now I'm in a place where I can help other survivors.
Yes.
So
yes, and you are. Let me just ask you, how did you cope during your trafficking experience? What did you use to cope? I know you said you did drugs and alcohol, but how did you cope?
I would say aside from those things, dissociation. I would dissociate it. I would check out.
Yeah. I
would literally be someone else in that moment, just to keep going and survive. And I know that's not the expected answer as far as coping through trauma, but that's one of the main reasons why I think I'm alive today. Is because I was able to compartmentalize and check out and be somewhere else when being raped or when experiencing those things. And that's what victims are looking for, is a way of escape in the horror, in the trauma, in the rapes, and so whether it's drugs, alcohol, dissociating, just any way to get away from it emotionally, spiritually, mentally, even though you physically can't get away.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Did you ever feel there were opportunities for escape or help during that time?
Yes. But I didn't know how to escape.
Yeah.
Because the cycle of trauma that I was in, my brain being cloudy, my just processing the things that were happening to me, it was so confusing. So although people would say, well, why don't you just run? Why don't you just leave? Well, there was complex trauma bonding sometimes with these traffickers, thinking that they were protecting me and helping me, but I was being manipulated and coerced and programmed, and thought that I was owned by them, or that I owed them something. Although there may have been times where it seemed like, oh, I could have just run away if I was at a store, out somewhere in public. The mental, emotional, spiritual bondage that I was in didn't afford me to just run or just escape.
Not so easy. No. And what support systems have been helpful to you in your recovery?
I would say faith-based community is a big deal. Counseling, various types of counseling, and intentionally confronting areas where I needed to heal. So much of my life, I dissociated things, whether subconsciously or intentionally, to cope. So I just knew that when it was time to heal, I didn't want to just sweep things under the rug or not think about them. I was like, I have to get through this. I have to confront this if I want to be able to live a life that's full of purpose. I think healing happens from so many different angles. I needed healing in every area. I needed healing with my relationship with money, so that money wasn't triggering to me. I needed healing with how do I just have relationships with people. I needed healing from every angle of my life.
And how was your family in all of this? Was that a support system for you?
I'm sure they would have loved to be. They knew about what happened in my, as a toddler. But due to my mental health and dissociating things, I was one way at home. When I did live at home with my family, I would stay in my room all the time. My family knew I struggled with depression and different mental health, but I just was so shut off. And I think that the nature of dealing with things in the spirit realm as well as in the natural, there was so much shame that even though their family was there, I didn't really feel like I could talk about it. I didn't fully understand it myself, So.
Are there any misconceptions about human trafficking that you'd like to address?
There's several.
Yes.
There's lots of misconceptions about trafficking. But I think in this conversation, I would love to highlight the fact that trafficking isn't something that's just overseas. It's not something that just happens somewhere else. It happens right here in this community, next door. The kids that go to your kids' school, they're walking in and out of different businesses or restaurants. They're in the community. It's happening right here. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions, I would say, is because people can kind of like hear about sex trafficking and think, oh, that's so far removed from me. It's so far away, right? And they think, it doesn't really affect me.
Right.
But it does.
Right.
And it is here in our area. And it's all over the United States. And I think that the biggest misconception is like, oh, if I hear about it and I look the other way, I'm not really a part of the problem.
Right.
But ignorance is why it's so prevalent.
Yes. Agreed. So we want to gain understanding and wisdom from your experience and come along survivors with excellence. What advice would you give to Zeteo or other organizations or individuals looking to support survivors of sexual exploitation?
I think that I'm glad that you're asking this question, because it's important for organizations to include survivor input, like survivors in leadership, survivors looking through like processes and sharing thoughts and feelings about things, because sometimes very well-meaning, incredible people can make these plans, but they're very disconnected from the reality of what survivors actually need and what they're going through. So I love that you're even asking this question. That would be one of the things would be include survivors in your processes. You know. And because it's an educational journey working with survivors, you know. And then I would also say that the things that made us vulnerable to sexual exploitation are the same things that make us vulnerable afterwards, like after escaping or exiting. So those are the things that we need help with to heal. So if it was not having someone to talk to, if it was not having a support system or a community around us, if it was lack of mental health services, if it was addiction, like being able to, for a community to meet those vulnerabilities so that they're no longer vulnerable in those areas is like one of the greatest ways to prevent re-exploitation and allow someone to start healing. So really community is so needed, and looking at the whole person as a survivor. It's not just about, okay, let's just address spiritually. Let's just pray for you, right? It's like there's tangible things that are needed, basic needs as well. And just a lot of compassion. A lot of compassion in the triggering moments for service providers to know that there may be moments where there's panic attacks or moments where a survivor is triggered, and it's never personal. And I would say the people that were the most significant to me in my healing moments were people that were very compassionate and just understanding. And even if they didn't understand, just still there to listen and be a friend. Like what we really need is friendships.
It's beautiful. One of the privileges we have at Zeteo Community is being able to build the homes from scratch. And so I have asked many survivors, what do you think? What should these homes look like? What do you suggest would be helpful healing pieces to this? And it's their input is so valuable, and just really have appreciated that. And as you know, our main focus is the community that we're building, because it matters.
Absolutely.
Hearing you talk about it in your own experience is just a confirmation to us that, we're tracking. Because we don't want to just surfacely help some survivors, right? We want to see them free, like you are free, transformed lives, right? So what excites you most about what Zeteo is doing, and why?
Just the fact that Zeteo will be the only long-term safe home in this state is massive for so many reasons. Every victim in this state needs a safe place to heal. Needs the grace to be able to just focus on healing. And so having a long-term place to call home without having the stress of having to hustle or figure out how to pay rent, how to eat, how to get all of the basic needs, that alone is such a huge stress when you're also trying to heal from so much trauma. So to have a place to heal is just really, really exciting. And the various types of therapy that you all are going to be offering to survivors is really beautiful. Being able to work with horses and art and music and the various approaches to healing, because every survivor is so different. And so there will be something that will be incredible for one that maybe doesn't work as well for another. So I love that you're looking at all of the ways that you can surround survivors with support and opportunities to heal creatively. And that's something that's really beautiful, and it's going to be so impactful for the survivors in your care. It's so exciting.
We're quite excited. Yes, and we're getting close. So as a survivor and lived experience expert, which you are, what would having Zateo Community operating within the community mean for survivors currently looking for help within the state of Wisconsin and beyond? You kind of answered that. If there's anything else in there that you want to add?
I would just say it means hope. Because when you're in it, when you're in the sex industry or being exploited and sold, it's constantly on your mind that there is no way out of this and there is no hope. Life will always be this way. So to know that there is a place for healing would be hope to people that are stuck in it. And for the state to know that Zateo exists would mean that as awareness spreads within the state, it's not just like awareness without action. There's a place that survivors can go to heal. So it's not just like, okay, now we're all aware, but there's nothing for survivors. There's no place to heal. There's no place to actually get out. So I think that, the biggest thing is hope.
Agreed. Well, Sula, thank you so much for this. We just appreciate you being here, and your lived experience that you're willing to share with others is so valuable, and it's so valuable to me and to Zateo Community. And so I just want to thank you. Thank you for sharing your life with others. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for valuing survivors' input and survivors' voices as you're building this. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being willing to listen and hear a true survivor story whose life has been transformed. If you want to learn more about Zateo Community, you can look us up at zateocommunity.org, get more information, and join the community.